spot holds up.
Let's bring that up.
It's kind of slow.
We are live.
Is it?
Yes. Good
Good.
morning.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. We have a few of the comadres here today. We're going to be talking about something that's not fun to talk about, but a very real thing that happens every single day all over the country. And we're not any strangers to it here in California, and especially in our schools. So we have a few incidences of blatant racism by teachers, school board members, other school officials that have been coming to the day around the country, really. But we know of some very specific examples here in California that are coming out after George Floyd. So many things are changing. Every bit of racism, it seems like, is really being called out, and including in our schools. We hear all the time, the Karens. Everybody's calling out the Karens. Everybody's calling out the Chads, and so we're seeing it happening with school too. Last night, I was forwarded a petition that is here in my community locally in the Inland Empire, a teacher that was posting some racist things. But a couple weeks ago, we had a teacher in, is it Madera School District, Lexi?
Riverbank. So it's in the Central Valley outside of Modesto.
Mm-hmm. In the Central Valley, okay. And then during the week, we had a school board member from Madera Unified resign due to some postings that she made. So I don't know. Let's hear what you guys. Let's hear. First of all, let's hear, because the first one that I really heard about that we got involved in was the teacher at the Riverdale district, a high school teacher, and then all these kids started posting on Twitter. Yeah, we knew he was racist and sexist. So let's get an update on what's happening with him, because the superintendent did respond to the Twitter. So let's ask Mother Lexi what happened with that.
Yeah, so thank you to all of the comadres who helped bring attention to this issue. So I believe it was a month ago, some posts, there was a few students who, Gen Z, as we know, is very tech savvy. We just saw that play out in for Trump's latest campaign. So they were on Facebook and they found a bunch of posts where he said he would repost things like all lives splatter, and encouraging like running over peaceful protesters. There was a lot of other derogatory comments that I don't even want to bring up because it's just like unnecessary to continue those type of tropes. But
Right.
He taught in a district that is predominantly low income and overwhelmingly students that identify as a minority. And it's over 83% of students in this district identify as a minority. And he had taught in this district for over 20 years. So it's not, this just allowed everything going on in the national scene allowed for this very small, there's only one high school. So it's not like students had a different choice, like, oh, I'm not going to go to that school because I know that teacher is racist. Also, he was a US history teacher. So he's advocating violence on the First Amendment right. And it was really troubling for a lot of parents to know that, because he said a lot of racially charged Facebook posts where it just, you knew that their racial bias had some sort of play in the classroom because there's just a point where you know that that's just, why are you in the classroom if you don't believe that every student in your classroom can succeed? Because every student can succeed. It's the adult in the room that pushes this bias and doesn't allow the opportunity to succeed because of that initial bias. So thankfully, we did a bunch of, had there was a girl on Twitter who I don't even know, who's not even from our district, who created this little, like, I created an email and she created a easy app thing so they could easily just email every board of trustee member. And we got a lot of social media support. Nice. And he had to retire, so he will not be coming back in the fall. And what's unfortunate to me is the sheer amount of students that went through his classroom in the last 20 years. And I wish that this would have happened earlier, because who knows, like, I loved history. I loved my history teacher. I loved learning about history. And it really breaks my heart that there's students out there who probably didn't thrive in his classroom because they didn't feel comfortable. And it's, so it's, thankfully he's out, but it's just how many other teachers are out there, and how many adults in the system who do have these racial biases and who are in the classroom. So.
And he's probably not the only teacher that at that high school that has those beliefs. Unfortunately, there was a meme going around saying, the question, what can I as a white teacher do to, thwart racism in our schools? And the answer is, some of y'all need to retire.
Well, I think
so. If right?
I could chime in. The fact that this person was asked to retire speaks to a whole nother level of systemic oppression. But I think each one of us has a story to contribute in terms of how racism, everything that happened for years, let me just say that, it's been going on for hundreds of years. It just so happens that we're in a pandemic, so we are glued to our screens and we're able to see the killing of Mr. George Floyd that really said, yeah, a la madre, ya no more. Like, this shit has to stop, excuse my language. But I think, it's individual teachers, Leticia, you saw the petition that was started for here in the Inland Empire with, one teacher as an example. And we know that this is just a very tiny, minuscule effort of trying to say these racist individuals do not belong in our school system, do not belong with our children. But the truth of the matter is that we are in a momentum right now where we're saying we have to speak truth to power, because it's not just these individual teachers. Yes, they need to go, but is the system and the foundation in which the system has been founded on that was racist. And so, Lexi, you said you'd like to, you want to learn about history, but they're giving you one side of the history, right? It starts when Christopher Columbus supposedly discovered and killed our people. That shit didn't start there, right? It started beyond that. And so I think what's given us the platform right now, at least for me specifically as an educational scholar, is to say, let's look at the premise of education at the foundation. The reason education was established as a system, not just in our communities, but the whole country. Education as a system was created to assimilate folks, to be white, to know the white history, to know, you have some math and some science, but even that has been skewed. So I think right now we are at a very critical moment that we shouldn't just sit around and say, oh, ¿qué tal y tal dijo esto? Oh, ¿qué tal y tal? Yeah, those are helpful. Those are anecdotal stories that are very powerful. Absolutely. But I think we have the responsibility at this point to use data, longitudinal data, that this has been consistent. We go back to 1947, Bennett versus Westminster's case, where a Mexican Puerto Rican young, daughter was being marginalized, and they fought for us to have desegregated schools. I mean, it starts from the effort of fighting a system. Now we have individual teachers who don't care to show their racist identity. And so we're tackling them at the individual level. And so it's good for us to have these conversations. It's good that we have petitions that we want to get rid of these individuals. But the petitions to get rid of one or two individuals is only a kernel of a movement that needs to be happening right now, which is really holding folks accountable, saying this system is racist. The way you've structured it is racist. And we, talk about special ed has been misused. It's just a catalyst to label our students as not performing. We talk, and I'm just giving some grand statements, right? The achievement gap. Black and brown kids are not meeting the achievement. Well, shit, the achievement gap was created purposely. No one's going to talk about, we had laws early on that prohibited brown and black kids from picking up a book. We don't talk about that, but now we're measuring them according to a certain standard. And so I think we really need to talk about racist individuals who are in our system, but we need to really talk about systemically how we are having to push back, because we've been talking about policies but this is more than that. This is more than just talking about individuals. I think we really need to talk about why is it that the Central Valley it's a plague, right? The Inland Empire, a lot of data that's available is LA specific. Alma and I have had these conversations about LA centric. But for those of us in the rest of the state, we also have those trends. And so I think right now we have the momentum to say, fíjense bien, because this shit's been going on everywhere. And you have not focused on some really marginalized communities. And so I think that's what you see, Leticia, that we're trying to do the movement in the Inland Empire because this has been going on for too long. But it's systemic. It's not individualistic, individual people. It is systemic. And it's systemic when we allow them to stay in the classroom, knowing very well that they have these deficit ideas of our students. And so again, that's the conversation that we want to be able to focus in on in terms of what we really need to be doing.
Because it's not just the teachers in the classroom, it's the principals, it's the people at the district office, it's people on school boards. Like Modesto City School Board went back had this incredible English learner program for refugees that, because the teachers knew they're intelligent. Like, just because you're an English learner doesn't mean you're any less capable than any other student. It just means that you don't know English. Every other country teaches several languages. In California, it wasn't until 20 years ago that we finally were like, maybe we should allow dual immersion. Maybe we should do that. It's like, well, why did you have this hesitancy before?
Right.
Why? And it's just this underlying systemic problem that they talk about the achievement gap. And it's like you said, it's not a new thing. It's low now, but it was lower before. We're slowly making progress, but even then it's too slow. And millions of kids are going to fall through. We have 6.2 million students in California. Millions of kids are falling through the cracks because of our system. It's just ridiculous to me.
Because it was structured to be that way. I mean, part of it is when we talk about, and this is what's happening for the last 3 weeks, and I've been having these conversations with parents, because a lot of it, parents are coming to ourselves saying, help me talk about racism to my kids. Like, I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know how to I don't know how to talk about this with children, so please guide me with that. And in order to talk about racism in schools in this case, go back to high school. So when we talk about and I talk about the reason existed was to assimilate folks to be white. Plain. I mean, I'm not going to be around the road. That's what it was existed. We talk about Native American brothers, including our people, who were taken to we'll strip them of their clothes, strip them of their hair. Everything about them was not good. That's what they were being told.
Supposed to be assimilated to be white.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But that was cool. But the point was it stems from a eugenics movement. So we have to, again, tell people, Google eugenics movement. What is the eugenics movement? The eugenics movement was a science that was created by a group of white men that they actually manipulated their data to say Black, brown, Native, other than white, are not capable of learning, are not capable of acquiring an education. what they're supposed to be doing, they're supposed to be our labor. They're going to be the backbone and build this country, so we need labor. So that consideration, and I'm giving you this very superficial, broad strokes of eugenics movement, just to be able to contextualize education, because now that we have science to say people of color cannot learn, and they're going to be our workforce, the system education was built that way. So when we talk about current day, modern day slavery, we're practicing it right now because we have tracking of our kids. And we know this, a lot of our kids are pushed out of our schools. And for those who are in schools, you're going to be either tracked to go to the, and at least for California specific, UC, CSU, or community colleges. And everything's embedded in terms of how deficit we're going to think about a community college because they're just the community college. But all that is embedded in that we need to have a flow of folks to be our labor. And so absolutely, we're going to lose our students. Absolutely, they're not going to be ready to go on to college because it was created in that mentality. Brown folk, color folk are not supposed to be intelligent. I'm not supposed to be a Chicana born in Mexico with a PhD from UCLA. Hell no, that was not part of the plan. But we're here. We're here. And the reason why they're scared of folk like myself is because now we're able to speak to the reality of the system. And so just yesterday, we were having this conversation on social media on Angela Davis consistently reminding us racism has been at the core of the fabric of this country. She's been saying this for years. And now it's our generation to carry that on, saying this is real. Stop trying to hide it. And so, yes, the structure of education, it's from superintendent all the way down to our, janitors in our schools. They get these messages of how we are treating our students. And so, going back to the history is we are not teaching this history ever. In K-12, forget about it. We're going to tell our parents this exists. We're going to tell our parents that we're actually tracking them to be our workforce. Hell no, we're not going to tell them that. What we are going to tell them is that Latino parents don't value education. Let's give them that narrative. Let's make sure people believe that shit, right? That we don't honor and value education. So that feeds into the dominant story. That feeds into us having a kind of like, okay, we're going to settle for this mediocre education because, that's what we deserve. And it's part of that whole machine. It's part of the eugenics movement. It's part of, from the eugenics movement, they created the standardized tests. Standardized tests were created likewise to prove that white men were smarter than people of color. And this is all history that we all should have access to, history that we should know. Hell no, I'm not going to take that standardized test because I can orally tell you what I know because our traditions are that of oral histories. I'll excel. But, again, we go back to the machine. The education as a machine was created purposely. What we see right now, pushing our students out, like I said, our world is the social reproduction theory. Social reproduction is that we need to reproduce and sustain this country, where this country is a capitalist country. And so we have to have cheap labor. And who's going to fill those positions? Not white folk. Not white folk. And so here we are now. We're seeing that not only on one side, we're losing our students in education, but now we have, dealing with the consequences of tolerating bullshit like racist teachers in our classroom. And this stems from hundreds of years, but even, the example, and I'm not quiet for a minute, but the example of how education as an institution was to assimilate, but also to dominate over us. And one way to dominate over us is to destroy what our identity is. And one clear example, and we know this as well, is how they butcher our names. I'm not Marta, I'm Martha. You're not Fernanda, you're probably Fernanda. And I could give, other examples of how it's the immediate touch with the student is to destroy and try to silence their identity because of the purpose of acculturating them into this dominant story and dominant way of living in the society. And so, and that dominance is that we are not up to par and we are made to feel that way. And so if they don't push our students out, we are made to feel like maybe education is not for me. Maybe I should just step out of the way, right? And so it's complex, it's multi-layered, but I think part of the reason that I know Alma reached out to me for me to be part of this conversation is to remind us not to get lost in just one scenario or one individual. These are the symptoms of a larger disease, which is white supremacy. Just like the pandemic and just like the killing of our Black brothers and sisters, it's all rooted in white supremacy, and we're all in this together. And so again, I just wanted us to be able to have that context to be able to say, when we talk about racism in education or racism in schools, it's fundamental in the reason and how the institution was created in this country. But I know, I think Leticia, might have had just like internet challenges.
But
I think,
I wanted to get to Des and Fernanda, if you guys have any input of like direct experiences, and I believe you guys both went to Los Angeles Unified, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we both went to LAUSD. I can't pick us up. I really appreciate that, just like your contextualization of all that. This just really hit home. So a part of the reason why my mom really moved to LA, she's actually from the Central Valley. I was born and raised in Bakersfield. It's just saw so much of the generational massive impartation happen in her community. So like so much empathy. Like I can imagine like would have just disrupted this continuous cycle where so many men in our family just end up going back and forth to jail and aren't seen as like folks who like can valuably like quote unquote like produce in the society, which is like so painful to see people continue having to like navigate through that. But yeah, it's something that is going on for far too long, and to like have so much urgency to really disrupt this system because our communities are so valuable and have so much to offer. It's just a matter of like really having these shifts so that our schools reflect the needs and resources and opportunity that we know our communities here deserve. But yeah, I'm based here in Los Angeles. I can quickly touch a little bit about the school board meeting that happened on Tuesday, because I know that was a really big push that folks were coming towards too. The board had an opportunity to make a really bold movement and really get police out of schools in a really amazing and much needed way. Like, we know the impact of police in our communities isn't what we need. We don't need more random searches disrupting our classrooms, more securities who are like, just by very presence to criminalizing folks in the classroom, and overwhelmingly voted no after about so many hours of just hearing real public comments and stories from folks, which was just bizarre and just like a slap in the face to so many Black and brown folks who were organizing to really get the impact of these folks out of the schools. But yeah, I can hand it over to Fernanda. I know she's really just worked so much on this too, especially with students who are going through the college pipelines and the whole college application process as well.
Because we should have more counselors like you.
Good morning. So I'm working on getting my master's to become a counselor. But I have been working with students since I was 18, and I got to see different backgrounds, both from my community at Southgate, all the way to East LA, all the way to Monte, South and Monte. And you guys brought very valuable points of how it is systematic, because I've seen it in the schools when I was working in a low-income area, how those students were treated, how my supervisors talked to me of what were the expectations of these students, that these students weren't supposed to be going to a UC or Cal State because they didn't have the proper GPA. They didn't pass the standardized examination. And when talking to some of these students in 9th grade, 10th grade, they told me that it's not because they didn't want to learn, it's because they weren't given the support to learn. They were always told, you can't do it, you can't do it. So it was embedded to them since they entered that high school, like, I can't do it, I can't do it. And once they hit 11th, 12th grade, they started rebelling. They started saying, well, I can't do it. My teachers are telling me I can't do it. My counselors, they come and go because it's a low-income school and nobody wants to stay there because there's a lot of cops, there's a metal detector, and it's like they're feeding into the prison pipeline. And it would hurt because they would be a block away from my old high school. And I know how it feels to be told you can't do it, because I personally was told I can't do it from a very young age, not because of what my race was, but mostly because of my disability. my disability, you're not supposed to be graduating high school. You're supposed to either drop out because you did not meet the standardized expectation of the grade level that you were in, or you were supposed to go working directly. So meeting the expectation of graduating from a Cal State is, like Dr. Martinez said, you know, you are expected not to even graduate from college. You're not expected to even go to your master's program. So being part of that percentage of the triple minority that I ended up learning in college is something I held proudly up to this point. I say I'm triple minority, and I don't care what people have to say. And I tell my students, you guys can do it no matter what. And I try to be the support system and try to be there for them the best I can, because I always get moved around from school to school.
Yeah.
And
Before I technical difficulties, I was starting to say that there's a lot of power that teachers have, especially in school. When I actually first thought that I would run for school board in Fontana, they were advocating against who was failing every Latino kid in her math class, in her algebra class, that was necessary to go on to college. She was failing everybody for years and years. She was just failing. It didn't matter what you did, you were going to fail in her class. And that's the kind of power and that they have, right? To not support what you're trying to do, to not support getting into colleges and universities. And that is rampant, because even from when I was a teacher, I could see that there were a lot of teachers that would not properly teach their students because they didn't feel like they had any reason to. Well, this person is undocumented, so why do they really need to learn this stuff? That's the kind of stuff I would hear. Yeah. And so it definitely is a whole vibe among some teachers. And it's part of the reason why I actually left teaching, because it was so frustrating that I didn't want to be a part of that, continue to, and started to do things to move in the direction of trying to, help against that. But it's so there, and it's been obvious for forever. And so now the fact that it's all coming to light is good, but absolutely we need to do more. And a lot of these teachers that are teaching still, not just be called out, but we need to know who they are. We need to find a way to get rid of them. And it's really hard because the union supports her by virtue of the fact that, it's so hard to fire a teacher unless they retire or unless they do something so egregious. And mind you, by egregious, I mean, you literally have to be abusing children in your classroom in order to really have a case against you, which needs to change.
Even that,
so,
I'm sorry, but even that, we know that's not happening.
You get moved to another school.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at some we're talking child molesters. We're talking teachers with sexual predatory backgrounds. I'll give you an example, Desert Sands Unified School District. Again, Inland Empire. We have teachers, we know, even at the college level, they have a track record of predatory behavior against students. And what happens to them? They get moved around. They go from high school to another high school to a middle school.
Passing the trash.
They're supposed to be out of the system. And then when they are retired, they still get their damn benefits. Those benefits belong to our kids. So this is ingrained in the system. I mean, trust me, when I went I'm from Indio. I went back home for just a year. I put my children in elementary school. Within 6 months, I had a teacher asked to be retired early and a principal relocated from the school because of me petitioning and saying this shit's got to end. But you don't put them in another school. You get rid of them. You put it on their history, just like you put credit on stuff in our credit report. Guess what? We need to put some shit on the record because this is not acceptable. But I also want to be mindful that we also need to be critical that when we say, oh, it's just a vibe, or they feel some, this is white supremacy at its finest. People believing racist ideologies, people believing that undocumented children should be in cages, people believing all of these deficit notions of our people, even people of color who believe this crap. It's white supremacy at its finest. So when I'm invited to talk about racism, we're going to have to talk about white supremacy at its root cause. It goes back to what I said, the evolutionary process. People bought into it. People who, even all with good intention, our teachers, with good intention, our counselors, with good intention, go into administration. Slowly but surely, the culture within that space is going to let them fall back into complacency. They're going to be complacent and say, oh, pues, maybe they're not good for college. Oh, well, maybe they should just be special ed. Maybe we should just send them to alternative continuation school. It's too easy. And I've seen this, I taught in elementary, I taught at college level, I became an administrator at the community college. I had to get out. It was too easy to get suckered into the complacency. And that's what's happening.
Sorry. I wanted to bring an example to something like that.
How do we?
So my principal at my high school on Cinco de Mayo, the day before, he went on the loudspeaker and told the entire school to keep things okay the next day. No one was allowed to bring the Mexican flag to school. And he also enacted other policies similar to that. And my Spanish teacher, my freshman year, I will admit I took Spanish 1 my freshman year to get an easy A. I'm sorry, Mom. And my Spanish teacher, though, teaching Spanish 101, the classroom was right next to where the FFA students, Future Farmers of America, had all of their animals. They had all of their plants out there. And he would routinely open the window and yell out, "La migra." This is our white teacher teaching Spanish 101, who then, this was in 2008, so then he'd also talk about how Obama was actually born in Africa, and he was egregious. Like, it was a horrible teacher. The principal let it happen. This principal then moved to another school. This school had an incredible English learner program. He dismantled it. And then he got promoted 2 years ago, and now he's at the district office, like running programs. And like, it's kind of a reward system for keeping this institutional racism alive. You get rewarded for it because the system is racist. So if you are racist, you get rewarded. You move the ladder. You get to go up more quickly than other people. You get accommodations. You get awards. Like, wow, you're really turning things around. How do you do it? Oh, well, that same school in that same district got highlighted at the assembly for over-policing students of color. And it's just, it's really disgusting that we reward people for being racist to our students. And they get rewarded, and that needs to stop.
And that's all over the entire system of public education.
That's one example in one district that has over 20 schools. So this is just one person in this district. And it's just Inland Empire, Bakersfield, Sacramento, Reading. This is happening all across the state. And California is a hub for refugees. And so we are bringing students from all of these other countries, and they think that they are going to be getting this American dream, and they get in a classroom with a teacher who looks down on them because of the color of their skin and doesn't think that they have it in them to go to a 4-year college. Senator Blanca Rubio said that her and her sister, Susan, who is also a senator, were told in high school that they want to go to college by their school counselor, that they want to go to college. And now they're both in the legislature. And it's just this system that doesn't see brown or black people as succeeding in this country. And it's disgusting, and it needs to end.
I mean, that's precisely the movement. I think, Leticia, we can't hear you. Your mic.
Sorry. Sorry about that. So what do you guys think about this, kind of new, I don't know what it is, an internet revolt where people are coming up with petitions and shaming people on social media, the actual things that they are posting about people of color and other awful things. What do you guys think about this? Do you think these things will mess? Do you think a petition? Because I know I sent the petition to the board member in Fontana on the teacher from last night, and they're going to look at it. But in Fontana, it's very difficult to get rid of teachers because the whole administration is the same way. But that said, I think overall it's a good idea to call everybody out where we see it. So what do you guys think about this new social media shaming of these teachers and school board members?
I mean, freedom of speech only.
Will it help or?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on this when I had to do my petition, and I was looking into specifically freedom of speech because I knew that would be the rebuttal point of like, well, it's freedom of speech, First Amendment. I can say and do whatever I want. But if you are a teacher or if you work within schools, your freedom of speech, if it impacts the way, like how you act in a classroom, and you can show that that has some sort of bias at how things play out, freedom of speech is null and void. You don't get to be racist and then go in a classroom and say, you see all students are at the same level playing field. Like, no, that doesn't work. I'm all for it. Call them out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important for.
What do you think, Des?
Yeah, it's so important. And like, it just reminds me of like white supremacy, anti-Black, anti-Muslim mindset. This is in our high school, at our school boards, we have school board members whose jobs it is supposed to like really amplify and protect students' voice and protect students from experiencing this period, but they continue to hold this mindset and their bosses do. I'm so much more interested in really changing that system, which is why I know it's so important to like get involved in your school board elections. Most school boards in this country have less than a 20% voter turnout rate, and even oftentimes like have key buzzwords of like, I'm pro equity because it's in my pamphlet and that's it, and say nothing else about it. That's why it's so important to allow using who are in these positions who like do unapologetically support our students, especially our students of color, and don't have to keep participating in this cycle where like we just are calling people out, but there aren't any like action movements going on around it.
Yeah, I do agree a lot with Des. Again, these people should be held accountable for their actions. And a lot of students, as Lexi said, if you put this into their brain, they feel unsafe, and that creates a very unsafe environment for them to even learn and succeed. And they end up dropping out, or they just end up, not feeling comfortable to even going to their own school, which it should be a place of learning. It should be a place of where they thrive, where they feel like they're at home, but they don't. They feel criminalized. They feel like they're not part of it.
I think these petitions calling folks out for what they're doing is helpful because precisely what Fernanda just mentioned, students are able to see that adults are taking some action against individuals who are making them really uncomfortable and who are having a huge impact on their life. I mean, our children spend, granted the context we're in, we're not there in school, but they spend more time with the adult in school than they do with their parents. And so I think part of this is also like all of you said, it's good to be able to say, you put them on blast, essentially, be saying, we see what you're doing, and we obviously know that you don't belong in the classroom. We'll do what we can to get you out of the classroom. But like Lexi mentioned, and there's other methods the system would say, okay, we'll take them out of the system and put them as some kind of administrator. And so they're still in that system. So going back to Des's point is like, what is the action we're seeking for? Yes, we want to put them on blast, but then what comes out of that? And I think it also speaks to, the administrators at that school site, and it goes up to the superintendency, which, like they say, you also mentioned. But it also, for me, speaks to who are these teachers? Who are they? Where are they coming from? How are they trained? And, Rita Coley, who's a professor at UCR, also a colleague from UCLA, she has spent a lot, and other folks have spent a lot of time doing research on the quality of teacher training. The quality of teacher training has now, we need to take ownership of it. It has to be anti-racist teacher training. If you don't get that, if you don't understand how you need to be anti-racist, then you do not belong in any type of educational setting. And it's a culture shift, right? Because now we know that the system has been built and has been sort of cemented a certain way. We're pushing. And in one of those push, and we saw this week, I think it was, the California State University requiring ethnic studies requirement for their students. And it's absolutely, you know how long it took us to get to this point? You know, I was mentored by Sal Castro since I was 14.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have a whole different experience in terms of transformational education. But it's about that, the legacy that we carry. How do we transform the system? And it's the ripple effect, right? It's like, it's not just this person in Fontana, it's this ripple effect. It's about the training, it's about administrators, it's about the hiring processes. It's all connected.
Absolutely. And I think it's really also sad because so many generations of students that have been directly impacted by racism in the classroom and in their school setting either didn't see it or didn't say anything about it because you just aren't supposed to say anything, you know, bad about your teacher, or you're just so used to being treated a certain way that it becomes sort of a Stockholm syndrome where you just accept the way that you're treated, and kids don't speak out, right? Even though they're being mistreated. So I'm hoping that this is really going to change that, and kids are going to speak up and they are going to say, you do not get to treat me that way, and you don't get to say those things to me and make me feel little and make me feel small and make me feel less than. So I'm hoping that happens, because for too long our kids have just kind of like said, well, what can I do against this teacher who's bullying me? Literally, teachers who bully their students and, you know, treating me this way, disrespecting me, discriminating against me. And then you have these white teachers that are like, well, I don't know why all these Latino kids are so disrespectful to me. Or I don't know why all these African Americans are so disrespectful to me. Maybe because you're not respecting them first. Kids are not stupid,
right?
You know, so I'm hoping that these conversations and this putting people on blast and letting people know that we're not taking it anymore is really going to translate into the classroom when and if our kids go back and call these people out and say, I'm going to tell somebody that you're not supposed to be in the classroom with us, right?
Well, I think it's also a generational thing. I mean, I grew up, and I know a lot of folks are still in this situation where, you know, a first generation college student, or, you know, first generation in this country, you know, that was born in Mexico, but is our parents often defaulted to, you have to trust what your teacher tells you, right? It's like this figure of authority because they're teachers, so they have a training that my parents never had. So, lo que te diga la maestra, tú haces caso, right? And so I think right now we're in a momentum, and I just had a conversation with about 40 parents, I want to say, and, you know, all virtual, but it was this notion of, let me tell you how the system really is working. And so you have to actually prepare teachers you have to prepare parents not to trust fully, to have a guard up, to say, why are you not giving my student algebra at 8th grade? Because that is a turning point for our kids, you know? And so I think part of this conversation we're having right now is, who is having access to this information? How are we making sure that our students and our parents are protected with this information? Because we're not going to buy into this whole issue of also they're respectful just because they're getting it from the home. No, they're not. They're getting it from your own schools. They're getting it from the media. Because this whole, going back to the whole white supremacy, it's everywhere. We get messages, subliminal messages, and sometimes not subliminal in terms of how we are supposed to be. And so I think right now it's that shaken movement. It's the technology to our advantage. It's making sure that we have folks who are connected, who are on the ground, who are making sure that we can speak in different languages. And what I mean that is I could have a monolingual conversation with parents, but also have a conversation with some superintendents and up at the state level. Let's engage with Newsom. We're here. We're ready. You wanted folks with PhDs. Guess what? Now we are. Here we are. Let's get it going, because now we're elevating the movement, right? Some of us came from the benefits of what the 60s, the civil rights, the Chicano movement has done for us. So we have to elevate systemic changes. There's more of us. And I think that's the beauty of this moment right now. We're realizing is now we are here. And so we need to keep pushing.
About 10 years ago, a friend of mine had this idea to, and I agree with her. And we just never did it, but we talked about creating like some kind of a website or tellonyourteacher.com kind of thing, because there were so many kids that we were doing that were experiencing racism. They were experiencing bullying by their teachers. They were experiencing all these different things, and there's no outlet really for kids to go. And like somebody mentioned in the comments, a whistleblower program. I think, yeah, our kids need that, like the whistleblower protection program, where they're free to say how to treat it and why it's wrong. And we maybe make that. Maybe maybe it's time to just create that, a space for kids to go and be honest about what's happening to them.
Yeah, she brings up a good point, because what happens to, like, with the student in Riverbank, what happened to all those kids? You mentioned that everyone on Twitter was like, yeah, we knew he was racist. But if you know your teacher is racist, how do you speak up? Because that is the same person who has your whole future in, like, your grade is determined by the same person that you're saying is racist against you already. And what happens if the administration agrees with the teacher, and then you're stuck in that classroom for the rest of the year, dependent on this person to give you a good grade? And it's, someone else mentioned too, like, how is racism not emotional abuse, and this is trauma? This is additional trauma on students. And that's just really important, that having a racist teacher would prevent a kid from wanting to go to school. And that's just, there needs to be some protection, a minimum standard of protection for students. I think that is reasonable. I just,
But it goes back to why is it that our students have to protect themselves? So
Right.
Yes, we want to be able to create these mechanisms so that they have a voice, so that we're able to project their voice. But I'm more of a, it shouldn't come from our folk all the time. Like it's exhausting. It has to come from the top. Like, so we see some superintendents or board members resigning. Good, get out. You need to get out. If you were caught posting some stuff, get out. And I think you're doing us a huge favor. But I think it also sparks a responsibility to what are those hiring practices. And so here's my comment with the human resources, right? Human resources as another structure within every structure. Human resources are supposed to protect the institution they represent. Basic definition. So when we think about HR, we think about what they're doing, how they're putting the job calls out, how they're selecting the candidates to come in and interview, right? All that shit is still embedded on how are we protecting this, not the student, the institution of education in the district, based on who is, the people.
We do need to do that, but the problem then becomes, as you guys all know, once a teacher, always a teacher. Many of these teachers who have been in the system for 20, 25, 30 years, they're not going anywhere, because there's no real easy way to get rid of them. Even when and Martha, you mentioned that you were an administrator. It's very difficult to get rid of these bad apples, as we call them, bad teachers. It's really hard. So once they're there, yes, we do have to have hiring practices where we start hiring better people. But the ones that are there, they're going to stay there until they retire, and they still keep on affecting our kids on a daily basis. There's definitely some work to be done around dealing with that issue. But
Yeah, I think
we're at 10:50. That went by so fast. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We're out of time for today because I know like a couple people have to go, and we are out of time for today. But we're going to continue this conversation because this is like so important, and we need to find a way to combat it and make sure that we have propositions to our legislators and
Governor.
resolutions for
Yeah.
on standby for our members. So let's talk about this some more for sure. In the meantime, you guys keep calling it out, keep putting it on Twitter, keep putting it on social media. Let us know. Send us the petitions. We will forward them and amplify them for you guys. You guys, thank you so much this morning for this great conversation. Appreciate it so much. And we'll talk again very soon.
we will.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Hello. Is it just us?